Welcome back. I'm really excited about today's explainer because we're going to be looking under the hood of something we all rely on but rarely think about, the human body's iron factory. How exactly does it work? What happens when it totally breaks down? And most importantly, how do we fix it? Well, let's just dive right in and break this whole thing down.
So let's start with a scenario that I think a lot of us are pretty familiar with. You're feeling utterly exhausted, right? Just completely drained. And the very first thought that pops into your head is probably, oh, I just need an iron pill for some quick energy. But here's the thing, that incredibly common belief, the idea that popping a standard iron pill is just a safe, guaranteed quick fix, it's actually a pretty dangerous misconception. It's really not just a simple matter of missing raw materials that we can blindly replace.
And that is exactly why we're splitting our journey today into 5 clear steps. First, what is anemia? Then we'll look at the difference between iron storage and hemoglobin. We'll cover why you need to beware of taking iron without testing, look at the everyday enemies of iron absorption, and finally, we'll introduce a real game changer, lactoferrin.
Okay, part 1. What is anemia?
At its core, anemia is basically a drop in our factory's final product, whether that means your red blood cell count is too low or your hemoglobin has dropped below normal. And when this happens, your blood literally loses its ability to carry enough oxygen to your body's tissues. Suddenly, those frustrating symptoms make a lot of sense, right? Complete exhaustion from just walking up the stairs, looking unusually pale, getting dizzy, or even experiencing pica, which is this really strange craving to chew on ice or eat starch that's actually specifically linked to iron deficiency.
Moving right along to part 2, storage versus hemoglobin. This is honestly where people get the most confused. We have to separate the raw materials we keep in reserve from the final product circulating in our veins. Think of ferritin as the main storage box in your factory's warehouse, which is kept in your liver and spleen. That's your backup reserve. Hemoglobin, on the other hand, is the finished product. It's the active oxygen carrier right there in your blood. For your biological factory to manufacture hemoglobin, it absolutely has to pull iron out of that ferritin storage box.
And this creates a pretty brilliant, but honestly kind of stubborn biological timeline. Your body will ruthlessly sacrifice its storage to protect that final product. First, your ferritin levels drop, but your hemoglobin stays totally normal because the body is just burning through those reserves. Next, you hit severe deficiency. Your ferritin is practically gone, but surprisingly, hemoglobin is still normal. Your body is fighting tooth and nail to keep delivering oxygen. Actual anemia, which is when hemoglobin finally drops on a standard blood test, only hits in the third and final stage. By that point, the storage box is completely empty.
Which brings us to part 3, beware iron without testing. This is a massive wake-up call. Why is it a terrible idea to just blindly throw raw materials at a broken factory? Well, taking iron without confirming a ferritin deficiency through a blood test can lead to a toxic buildup of iron in your organs. This is a condition called hemochromatosis, and it can severely damage your liver, your heart, and your pancreas. Plus, excess iron increases oxidative stress and literally acts like an all-you-can-eat buffet for harmful bacteria. But here's the absolute biggest danger. Anemia might just be a blaring warning siren for something much worse, like hidden bleeding from an ulcer or even colon cancer. If you blindly take iron, you might temporarily feel better, but you're just masking a dangerous underlying disease that needs immediate medical attention.
All right, let's look at part 4, the enemies of iron absorption.
Let's say you've done the blood test, you genuinely need iron, and your doctor prescribes it. Why would those raw materials just fail to get absorbed? Well, it often comes down to our daily habits. Do you take your iron pill with your morning coffee or tea? You really got to be careful with that, because the tannins in those drinks block iron absorption by up to 60%. You need to wait at least 2 hours. And the exact same rule applies to dairy products because calcium fiercely competes with iron to get through the exact same cellular gateways. Even common antacids mess this up, since iron desperately needs an acidic environment in your stomach to cross into your bloodstream. So always remember that 2-hour separation rule. It is absolutely crucial. Finally, we arrive at part 5, lactoferrin, the smart guard. So if the factory is broken, the cellular doors are locked, and the iron just isn't getting in, what do? Enter the real hero of our story, lactoferrin.
Now, this isn't just some dumb transport cart that blindly carries iron around and dumps it wherever. It's a highly intelligent immune protein. Think of it as a strict, super smart factory manager. It binds tightly to iron and decides with total precision exactly where it should go and exactly when to deliver it, all while protecting the iron from oxidative damage and keeping it away from those harmful bacteria we mentioned earlier.
It's actually amazing to see the biological domino effect this creates. When your body is inflamed, iron gets locked down tight inside your cells. But lactoferrin steps in and totally fixes the workflow. First, it lowers an inflammatory marker called IL-6, basically switching off the body's fire alarm. That drop automatically lowers a hormone called hepcidin, which is the exact hormone responsible for locking down your iron. Once that lockdown is lifted, the cellular doors, which are called ferroportin gates, just swing wide open. Now iron can finally flow freely out of your gut and your storage, straight to the bone marrow to build fresh blood. It literally fixes the mechanical root of the problem.
This creates a pretty huge contrast. Taking standard iron by itself is kind of like dumping tons of raw steel outside a factory where the doors are padlocked shut because of inflammation. The absorption is terrible and you end up with a pile of side effects. But when you combine lactoferrin with iron, you're fixing the factory. You're unlocking the doors, clearing out the inflammation, and providing the raw material all at the exact same time. Studies show this combo corrects hemoglobin levels faster and rebuilds that ferritin storage box way better than just throwing standard iron at the problem.
And that brings us to a really staggering number, 70%. Yeah, up to 70% of patients end up dealing with miserable side effects like severe nausea, stomach cramps, and just awful constipation when they only use traditional iron supplements. But because lactoferrin makes the absorption process so incredibly efficient, we don't have to rely on those massive, heavy doses of standard iron anymore, which means, thankfully, we can largely avoid all those exhausting side effects.
I want to leave you with one final thought to really chew on. Anemia is a symptom. It is not the disease itself. It's just the smoke signaling a fire somewhere else in the building. So you have to ask yourself, what is the hidden root cause shutting down your body's factory? Is it poor diet, hidden bleeding, chronic inflammation locking the gates? Use what we talked about today. Go have a real conversation with your doctor. Investigate the actual root cause and fix the source instead of just perpetually treating the symptom. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did.